Hello, everybody. This is Vince Russo. You can find me on vincerussobrand.com, where we do 6 days of video podcasting every week. But on Mondays and Thursdays, I'm here on wrestlinginc.com. On Mondays, we have a Raw review that we do right after the show. And on Thursdays, I do my rant, I guess you can call it that, called Nuclear Heat. And here we are with Nuclear Heat. And the topic of discussion today is going to be wrestling's failure to accept criticism. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And I have a lot to say today. And I may be all over the place. If I am, excuse me. Listen, I have no notes. There are no notes on this desk. I'm not a note guy. I speak from my heart. I speak what's weighing on my chest. I speak on what's heavy on my mind. And I just go. And I don't have an order of how I'm going to say things. I don't worry about being politically correct. I just speak the way I feel. And I have a lot of things I have to say today. But first, I want to open it up with this, which is a little off the beaten path. I'm a big fan of reality TV. The reason why is because I love characters and I love drama. And that's why I love reality TV. And I'm a fan of a show called Mob Wives, which is about women that were one way or another involved in the mob. Either they were married to a member of the mob or their father was in the mob, whatever the case may be. But yesterday, one of the characters on the show, as a matter of fact, early this morning, her name was Big Ange. She passed away with cancer. And Big Ange was a character that I absolutely loved because she had a personality that was bigger than life itself. But not only that, if you can imagine, her heart was bigger than her personality. She was really a good woman and a very good lady. She died early this morning of lung cancer at 55. Now, this is what I want to say, and I hope somebody out there understands what I'm saying. But the show Mob Wives is built on drama, and it's built on conflict, and it's built on arguments, and it's built on who's going to kick whose ass and who's got heat with who and who's calling who out. These women are constantly at each other's necks 24/7. That's what the show is built on. But it's not just this show. It's all of us, and it's the drama in all our lives. And quite frankly, I was a victim of it this week, and we're going to talk about that. But now when I look at Big Ange, 55 years old, passed away, left 2 children, left 6 grandkids. And I'm thinking to myself, if Ange knew then what she knows now, and she could have that time back, what would she have done with that time? Would there have been conflict? Would there have been arguments? Would there have been fights? Would there have been name calling? Or would she have spent that time around her family? Would she have spent that time around her friends? The same family and friends that surrounded her bedside as she passed away this morning. And that's something for all of us to really think about. Before we get caught up in drama, before we get caught up in burying other people and bullying other people and insulting other people and yelling at other people and hurting other people, think about how much of your time on this earth does that type of energy really warrant? Because at the end of the day, for every one of us, the clock is ticking, the clock is ticking, the clock is ticking, and you don't know when the end game is. The end game could be today. I could not be here tomorrow. You could not be here tomorrow. How are we spending our time? And that's going to tie in to exactly what I'm talking about today. Now, 2 weeks ago, I came on here and I talked about how I felt lack of character development and lack of stories was hurting the wrestling business. I came on here last week and I talked about how I felt lack of in-ring psychology could be hurting the wrestling business. I didn't plan on having a part 3 until a series of events that happened this week prompted me to, you know what? There's a third arm to this. And the third arm is, the failure to listen to and be open to criticism from people that have been there and done that and know what they're doing, how that is part of a problem in the wrestling business today. And in order for me to explain all that, I have to start at the beginning. 4 years ago, I walked away from TNA, and I walked away on my own merit. I was not asked to leave. I was not fired. I was not going to be fired. But the fact of the matter was the owner of the company had created such a political juggernaut within TNA, a political atmosphere that had not existed to that level the entire time that I was at TNA, that it was affecting the success of the company. And I was very concerned about that because I care about the success of the boys. When I say boys, I include the women as well. Wrestling is a business. This is their livelihood. They have a very short window of period of time to make money. So when something is affecting that, it concerns me. So as I pondered it and as I thought about it, I realized, listen, I don't want to be part of this problem. I want to help the process. And the only way I could do that was to eliminate myself from the process. So I left the company. I left 6 figures on the table, not knowing what I was going to do next because I felt it was the right thing for TNA at the time. From there, I attempted to open my own business, which was a failure. An absolute failure. I can admit my shortcomings. I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses, that has followed me my entire life is I am horrible at business. I'm not a business guy. I'm not a numbers guy. I am a creative guy through and through. But I realized at the time, being 51 years old at the time and knowing I had 20 years of wrestling experience, who was going to hire me? Who's going to hire a 50-year-old man to start a new career? I couldn't work the indies. I'm not a wrestler, so I can't work the indies. So as I saw my options were limited, I made the decision to open my own business. That failed miserably. Well, at the end of that run, I noticed that all the politics that went hand in hand with TNA, every one of the people involved had been eliminated. Nobody was there anymore. So I placed the call to Dixie Carter. Would there be any interest? Could I help in any way? She knew the reason why I left. All those people were no longer there anymore. The decision was made to bring me on as a consultant. Listen, we all know how that story goes. And this is one of the reasons why I have a massive amount of heat with the internet wrestling community, because the internet wrestling community does not understand we have personal people's lives and we have business. When you talk about gossip, rumors, and hearsay and people, that is personal. When you talk about the wrestling business, that's the wrestling business. And quite frankly, back at that time, somebody in the internet wrestling community took my situation with a vendetta and a personal slant, and quite frankly, cost me my job because they made it personal and they didn't go down the business road. That's why I vowed, if I was going to have a presence on the internet and if I was going to do podcasting, it was not going to be personal. I'm not going to talk about gossip and rumors and hearsay and who said what about this guy and this, that, and the other thing. I am going to talk about the business end of professional wrestling, which I know about and I'm schooled and I'm educated to do with 25 years in the business. So when I was no longer a consultant for TNA, I figure, you know what? I'm going to go into podcasting. And I'm going to be God, I always have such a problem with this word, an analyst, just like all the analysts that I see on TV. I'm a huge fan of MLB TV, and every morning, show after show after show after show, are analysts talking about the game, talking about the players in the game, positive and negative. From a business point of view, baseball from a business point of view. And, whether it's players, whether it's former players, whether it's former managers, former coaches, whether it's former GMs, whether it's former announcers, whether it's former beat writers, whatever the case is, you have people who are professionals in the field. They were actually one time or another involved in baseball and still are. And they're given their analysis or their critique on the game, players in the game, the way games are being managed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to do that. You know why? Because very few people are doing it. Not many people have the experience I have, where they were in, 3 different locker rooms behind the scenes of 3 different companies for over 20 years and had access to the greatest talent in the history of the business, talk to the talent, talk to some of the greatest agent, was literally attached to the hip of Vince McMahon for a number of years, got to spend time with people like, Bill Watts, and Dutch Mantel and, Eric Bischoff, with his level of expertise, and Bruce Pritchard and J.J. Dillon, and the list goes on and on and on. Jerry Jarrett. I got to be around all these people. So I got to learn the wrestling business from all aspects. And I considered myself an expert in the field. Not somebody, who's on an internet wrestling site or runs a wrestling site, and literally has not spent a day in the business. And what I mean is they've not been in a locker room on a consistent level. They've not been around the boys. They've not been around management. They've not been around the agents. They don't know how things are done and why, because they've not been there. And I can say that because I love Major League Baseball. I cannot be an analyst on MLB TV tomorrow. Why? Because I was not there. I did not experience what they experienced. I don't have an understanding for it. Even the beat writers, they interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wrestling. They were in the locker room, in the clubhouse after games. They lived it. As wrestling fans, you don't live it. If you interview, a wrestler here or there on the phone, guess what? They're kayfabing you anyway. Unless you've been in a locker room, unless you've been around the business, unless you have experience, unless you've been threatened, unless you lived every facet of the business, you don't understand the business. If anybody in the baseball industry said to me, Vince, as a fan, you really don't understand the business, I accept that. I understand that. I know what my boundaries are as a fan. I've never been in a locker room. I never hung around a locker room. I never sat on the bench with the team while the game was going on. I never went back to the dugout with the team after they lost a tough game. That's the difference. So I know my role. I know my limitations. But in wrestling, I was that guy. So my deal was, you're going to conduct yourself in a professional manner, but you're going to call a spade a spade. You're going to call it as you see it. You can't go into this, Vince, if you're waiting for the phone to ring, for Vince McMahon to call you and give you a job. Therefore, you're going to have to put everything the WWE does put over. You can't do that. You can't do this if you're waiting for Dixie Carter to call you and offer you another job at TNA. Therefore, you're going to have to put everything TNA does over. You can't do that. If you are going to have a podcast network, if you are going to allow people to spend their money and subscribe, then your loyalty has to be to those people with the truth. Good or bad, you give them the truth, which is your opinion as a professional, as an expert in the field who's been there and done that. So I accepted that. Why? The WWE is not paying my salary right now. TNA is not paying my salary right now. VinceRussoBrand.com pays my salary. Those are the people I am loyal to. Those are the people I am responsible for. Those are the people I need to be honest for. So at the end of the day, if somebody at the WWE or somebody at TNA gets their panties in a wad over something I said, guess what? Get over it. But we'll get to that in a minute. But here's my point. Every single thing I say on my podcast on VinceRussoBrand.com, right here on Nuclear Heat with Vince Russo on WrestlingInc.com, every Monday night with the Raw Review right here on WrestlingInc.com, everything I say, I'm assuming everyone is listening to. So in other words, I have to make sure I am prepared to back up my words 100% if I'm ever confronted by somebody that did not like what I said and did not accept what I had to say. I have to be man enough to be willing to stand behind my words. And therefore, I do not say anything that I would not say to the face of anybody. If I'm being harsh to Vince McMahon in a critical way around wrestling and not personal, I would be prepared to tell him that to his face. The same with Triple H, the same with Stephanie, the same with anybody involved. I'm assuming you're all listening. I will say everything that I'm saying from a professional standpoint to you directly. I have no issue with that. However, on the other hand, I would expect the same thing. If you don't like something I say, confront me. You know where to find me. I'm here every day. You know how to get a hold of me. Nobody's on Twitter more than I am. I do podcasting every day. It's not hard to get a hold of me. JBL and myself have exchanged DMs over the last 2 weeks. If JBL can reach me, anybody can reach me. But I would expect that same adult, mature behavior. If you have something to say about me, say it to me. Listen, we do a show on VinceRussoBrand.com, and we do it once in a while, not all the time. It's called Mark and Mark. Last night we did a little experiment yesterday, and we added a Mac. So it was Mark, and Mac. And, basically this morning I got feedback. Some people liked the show. Some people did not like it with the third wheel. So, I'm reading everybody's comments, those that liked it, those that put it over, but I'm also looking at the comments of those that I know, are fans of mine, And it's not coming out of hatred, and it's not coming out of we're going to bury the show because you're Vince Russo. What it's coming out of is this is how I honestly felt about the show, Vince, and I know you can handle it. So I took the negative comments with more importance, quite frankly, than the positive ones. I listen, at 55 years old, I don't need anybody to put me over. Whether you put me over or not, I don't care. I want to know how I can improve. I want to know how I could be the best that I can be. So I'm looking at those negative comments, knowing that they're coming from people that know Vince Russo and know the brand. So I'm taking all these comments into consideration. I tell this story all the time, guys. I tell it all the time. When WCW, after the first 3 months, when again, I made the decision to go home. Nobody told me to go home. Nobody said, Vince, you're relieved of your duties. What they told me is, we're going to change the structure. And I said, no, that doesn't work for me, so I'm going home. So I went home, and they continued to pay me. Okay? I was not fired. I was not let go, as some people would love to believe. I left on my own accord. But Ed Ferrara, who I had given the job to, as my assistant, I got him more money than the WWE. I brought him to WCW. He stayed on. Now, at the time, that hurt me and that bothered me. Why? Because what I'm looking at as a human being is that SOB, man. I got him the job. I got him more money than he was making at the WWE. Now he's going to continue to work there. You know, after what they did to me, that was my initial feeling. And quite frankly, as a stubborn Italian, it was difficult for me to get past that. Now, granted, I'm not an idiot. And I knew Ed's got a lovely wife, Fran. I knew Ed moved to Atlanta for the job. And I knew it was absolute stupidity on my part to think Ed Ferrara was leaving because I decided to leave. That's insanity. But there was a while there where Ed and I did not talk. So finally, Ed's working at TNA. I'm going to go work at TNA, and Ed and I need to talk. We need to bury the hatchet. And I'll never forget when we got together to talk. Ed looked me in the eye and he said, Vince, he said, I'm going to tell you something that you might not want to hear. And I said, what is that, Ed? He said, when you went home from WCW, he said, every time you talked to me, he said, all you talked about was you. You. Poor, pitiful you. Everything that happened to you, you never once asked me, Ed, how are you? Ed, what are you going through? And bro, I got to tell you something. When he said that to me, it was like somebody dropped a brick on my freaking head. And all I could do was look at him and say, bro, you're absolutely right. What a selfish prick, son of a bitch, a-hole I was. From the bottom of my heart, Ed, I apologize. I love you. And I want you to know, by telling me that, you've made me a better person. And that has always stayed with me. That, you know, people that know me, people that know my history, you know, people, you know, that were at least some point close in my life, people that care about me, when they have something to say, they're probably saying it because it's going to help me. So at that point, I have either two roads I could take. I could either take the screw you road, I don't want to hear what you have to say, F you, or I could either listen and see if there's some truth in those words and see if I can better myself through those words. Through the words of Ed Ferrara, I bettered myself, and that's why I'm very, very, very thankful for Ed for being brutally honest with me. Because he changed me. I mean, that statement I never forgot, and it was 15 years ago, whatever it was. Okay. With that being said, when Vince Russo critiques wrestling shows, whether it be TNA, WWE, Ring of Honor, Lucha Underground, when Vince is critiquing wrestling shows, what is Vince's MO? What is driving Vince to do this? Why is Vince doing this? Well, first of all, this is where it really gets confusing to me, because I get a lot of, you're bitter because you're not working for the WWE, or you're bitter because you're not working for TNA, or you're bitter because you're not in the business. Well, if that were the case, then I'd be trying to get back in. I'd be putting everybody over. I'd be kissing everybody's ass. I'd be telling you what a creative genius Vince McMahon is and what a great leader Stephanie and Hunter are. That's what I would be telling you. When China comes on my show and accuses Triple H of something, I would be defending Triple H. That would be my demeanor if I was actually trying to get back into the wrestling business. By criticizing them, I'm clearly not trying to get on their good side, because I know how they take criticism, and they don't take criticism well. So again, we go back to, why does Vince analyze these shows? Why does Vince criticize these shows? It's real simple, people. Vince has a family to support. And right now, Vince is working for VinceRussoBrand.com and WrestlingInc.com. That is where my loyalty exists. So I'm working for somebody at WrestlingInc.com. I am loyal to them, to give them the truth, to give them my honest opinion. That is what they're paying for. At Vince Russo Brand, I have subscribers that subscribe to my show. They are paying for the truth and honesty and criticism and analysis from Vince Russo. That's where my loyalty lies. So my driven goal is, first and foremost, to support my family. I am putting my third child through college, okay? Here's my second goal. I want the men and women in wrestling that are in the ring, breaking necks, getting concussions, retiring early, blowing out backs, blowing out knees. I want every single one of those people to make as much money as they possibly can. How do they make as much money as they possibly can? By their companies drawing and making as much money as they possibly can. Now, listen, nobody has to give me WWE financial statements. They do a good job tooting their own horn, how much they're making. This is up 30%. This is up 90%. This is up 100%. Good for you. My question is, how much higher would it be up if the show was actually watchable? How much more money would the men and women that are busting their asses on your show, how much money would they be making if more people were watching and more income were rolling in? So, number one, family. Number two, the people that make up wrestling in the ring, the ones that are doing it, the ones that are busting their ass, deserve to make as much money as they possibly can. can. Why do you think back in the Attitude Era, nobody was burying me during that time in the WWE? Why? Because they were making more money than they ever made in their entire lives. And that's what made me happy. The ratings didn't make me happy. The approval of the internet didn't make me happy. What was making me happy was Shawn Michaels was making as much money as possible because of how popular wrestling was. That's what made me happy. And that is still my motivation today. My third goal is family, the boys to make money. Third, to be proud to be a wrestling fan. I was proud when I was a kid in 1972. I was proud during WrestleMania, during the Backlund era. I was proud during the WrestleMania era. I was proud during the Attitude Era. I was proud during the early days of TNA. I want to be proud again. I want to be able to go to anybody I run into and say, hey, did you watch wrestling this week? Did you watch Raw on Monday night? You can't miss it. It's must-see TV. It's unbelievable. I can't do that now. I can't do that now with a clear conscience. Why? Because it's not good anymore. And I'm not comparing it to a time when I worked. I'm comparing it to a time when I saw Chief Jay Strongbow wrestle a match in a shark cage. I'm talking about that time. I'm talking about the Valiant Brothers against Tony Greer and Dean Ho. I'm talking about that time. I'm talking about Savage and freaking Hogan, and not Savage and Hogan. That too. I'm talking about Savage and Jake the Snake. I'm talking about that time. Has nothing to do with, oh, because of the Attitude Era, I'm burying today's wrestling. No. Has nothing to do with the Attitude Era. I've gone on record a million times saying the early WrestleMania era was better than the Attitude Era. I had nothing to do with it. So, I critique. I analyze. I'm an analyst in an attempt to make the show better. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, there are people in key positions of key companies that still keep in touch with me. And we DM back and forth, and we're very respectful. Some people I talk to on the phone, but there's a handful of people that get it, that actually get it. Why would Vince be going up on his high horse if he didn't give a crap? Why would he be doing it? What's Vince's motivation? Obviously, he's not trying to get a job back here. So what is Vince trying to accomplish? They know. You know what it is? It's Vince's passion. Vince means what he said. Vince used to be a wrestling fan. So maybe there's some substance to what Vince is saying. Okay? But that's the minority. The majority not only can't handle and accept the constructive criticism to better their product, they will not only not accept it, they will go out of their way to bury you. And they will go out of a way to make you look insignificant, like you never did anything, like you are a blip on the Attitude Era radar screen. Like, we're gonna do the JBL show and we're gonna bring up Vince's name every show, and somehow or another we're going to bury him. I'm just waiting for the self-destruction of Vince Russo. You know that's in the makings. You know that's coming first. Why? Because they can't handle criticism, and because they don't want to hear criticism from somebody that's actually been there and actually done that. You don't want to hear from the internet wrestling community. That's one thing. They've not done it. They've not been there. That's the equivalent of Bruce Bochy listening to me how to manage the Giants. That's the equivalent of that. But as somebody that's been there and done that for over 20 years, you don't want to hear my criticism because you don't like what I'm saying. Well, now we have to look at, why don't you like what I'm saying? well, maybe we don't like what he's saying because he's right. Maybe that's why we don't like what he's saying. But nonetheless, if he's not putting us over, then we're going to bury him. We're going to bury him every chance we get. We're going to bury him. We're going to bury him wherever. How dare he criticize us? How dare he try to make us a better product? Last week's show, I made some comments about the agenting in wrestling. I mentioned some names. I also made it clear in the broadcast that it was nothing personal against the agents. I was just looking at what may be a problem in the way they are laying out matches today. But I made it perfectly clear. This is not personal. This is business. I know how Pat Patterson used to lay out matches. I'm not so sure it's being done the same way today. So the next thing I know, one of these said agents went online and basically made the comment that I was negative and boring. Vince Russo is negative and boring. Okay, first of all, you can call me a lot of things, but like boring is probably the only thing you can't call me. I wish I was freaking boring. I wish I didn't get passionate. I wish I didn't get all wound up like I am now, because I know my stress level goes up. I know it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on my heart. I know I am literally cutting years off of my life. And guess what? I wish I could be boring. If I could be boring right now, I would not be feeling the blood from my neck rush to my brain, which I'm feeling right now, which I'm opening it up right now to a brain aneurysm live while I do this podcast. So boring I am not. I'm pretty sure boring I am not. But the negative comment really bothered me. And I'll tell you why. Said agent, do you really think I wake up in the morning and I say, what am I going to be negative about today? Who am I going to bury today? Do you really think that's how I look at things? Or do I look at things, okay, I got my job today. I got my podcast today. I'm going to constructively criticize. I'm going to analyze. What is it I'm going to talk about? Why in my wildest dreams would I want to be that negative guy? Listen, bro, I could become the internet wrestling darling if today I started burying Roman Reigns. I go on here week after week after week after week, and I say, hey, listen, I'm a Roman Reigns guy. I know a lot of people aren't, and you know, I am. I have no problem saying that. I'm a fan of Roman Reigns. So if I wanted to be negative, then I would follow suit and I would start right there. But I don't have an issue with Roman Reigns because my objective is to not be negative. My objective is to make the product better based on my 25 years experience. So this individual, you know, who, by the way, not to mention any names, if you want to figure it out, you'll go back in history and see I actually gave him his first big break on the big stage. But over the years, you forget that. Over the years, you forget who gave you a break, who was there, at the start. You forget all that because it turns into what have you done for me lately? So we forget, we wipe out the past. Thank God Shawn Michaels did not wipe out the past, who I love dearly. And the only one who has really gone on that WWE network and put me over. God bless you, Shawn Michaels. He's not forgotten, the past. But anyway, I did what I always do. I had a problem with the negative. So I said, you think I'm negative? No problem. You know where to find me. You want to talk to me about it, man to man, face to face. I'm right here as an adult. I'll be happy to talk about, because like I said, I don't say anything that I would not say to somebody's face. I assume everybody's listening. Well, the next response was basically, I'm paraphrasing, you are a piece of shit and, you just deserve to be flushed down the toilet. Okay. Keep in mind, everybody, this is a man well in his 40s who represents TNA management. This is an individual on the TNA management team, which tells you right there exactly what's wrong with TNA management. To go on Twitter and to call somebody who's contributed to the business, who's been in the business for 25 years, who gave you your start, to refer to him as a piece of shit as a part of TNA management, that right there tells you why TNA has their problems. But you know what? He didn't sucker me in. I went right back and I said, bro, listen, I'm not trading barbs with you on the internet. This is childish. This is stupid. You want to talk to me man to man, face to face, I'll be happy to do this. Well, the next response was, you are acting like a jilted ring rat. And my response was, you want to talk? We'll talk. I'm not acting like a jilted ring rat. I made a comment. You made a comment personally about me that I'm negative, and I would like to discuss that with you. I don't know how a ring rat would act in that manner. I really don't. I don't understand how a jilted ring rat is compared to somebody that you made a personal comment about that wants to confront you over. I don't see the connection. Nonetheless, I get a third response, and now I get a third response. I finally said, listen, this is absolutely silly. Let's talk about this. Follow me so I could DM you, and we'll talk this thing out. Finally, somewhere in this exchange, the last and final thing I'm called is I'm called a bitch. He calls me a bitch. You're a bitch. Okay, so because I want to have a conversation with you, man to man, because I'm negative person, because you could not handle my criticism. We've gone from that to me being a bitch, me being a jilted ring rat, and me being a piece of shit that you want to flush down the toilet. Okay. This is somebody in TNA management. This is somebody that the young wrestlers coming into the company are looking up to, are going to for direction. But it goes much further than that, because as I said, I told you why there was a problem in character and storyline. I laid it out. I told you why I think there's a problem in ring psychology. And now here's the biggest problem. When you have people on the outside that have been there, that have done that are knowledgeable, that have experienced success, and they try to tell you in as a constructive manner as they can, this is what's wrong with the product. This is why it's wrong. Maybe you should try this. The fact that I'm not sitting here putting them over, and I'm being loyal to myself and loyal to those paying my salary. Quite frankly, I've been blackballed by the professional wrestling business. And you know what? That's fine with me. That's perfectly okay with me, because I'm going to continue to speak the truth. And if they don't want to accept the truth, and if they don't want to take the criticism, fine. If they want to go on, legend shows and bury me on Monday Night Raw shows, and go on Twitter and call me a jilted ring rat, whatever you want to do all that, that's fine too. But the fact of the matter is, as long as Vince Russo is being paid, and let me make one thing perfectly clear. The majority of those that subscribe to VinceRussoBrand.com are those that no longer enjoy wrestling, are those that are in the same category that I'm in. They enjoyed wrestling from eras years ago, not so much now. And honestly, don't you think those are the people you should be listening to? You know, it seems to me now like you're catering to the internet wrestling community, people that have no experience whatsoever. You're catering to them, and they're already there. They're already built in. They're not going anywhere. You're catering to them. But yet the people that have left and the people that are no longer watching, we don't care what they have to say. We're not interested in bringing them back. We're not interested in a Vince Russo reminding us, hey guys, this is what worked when I was there. This is the way we did things. This is what worked. I'm looking at numbers now, guys. And if the wrestling audience is going up, then guess what? Vince Russo is irrelevant. Vince Russo doesn't know what he's talking about. Vince Russo is a jackass. Vince Russo is a jilted ring rat. Vince Russo is a bitch. Vince Russo is a piece of shit. Vince Russo is all those things. If your numbers and your audience exceeds what we had while I was working for the WWE, but that's not the case. For 15 years, you've seen an arrow go down, and I don't care how loud you blow the trumpets. Yeah, you have a WWE network now that's making money. Yeah, you're making money off of movies now. We didn't have that back then. Yeah, you're making money off of other social media outlets that we didn't have back then. Yeah, you're making money in all these places, but the fact of the matter is the people that watch and enjoyed wrestling have gone from this to this. You made it a niche product, and the numbers back that up. And here's another thing. Let me just point this one thing out, and then I'm going to wrap this up. Vince McMahon goes on there today. We don't live and die by the numbers anymore. You know, there's so many other ways, social media, yada, 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 yada. First of all, Vince McMahon, I'd love you to tell that to USA Network. I'd love you to tell the executives at USA Network, we're not living and dying by the numbers anymore. Because guess what? USA Network are living and dying by the numbers. That's what networks do. If they didn't, there would be no ratings. There would be no numbers. There would be no measuring how many people are watching your show. When are they tuning in? When are they tuning in? They would not be doing it anymore. So the network, USA Network, is living and dying by the ratings. They don't care about your WWE network. They don't care about how many T-shirts you sold, how many foam hands you sold. They care. So first of all, tell them it's not the priority it used to be. Second of all, you know, you hear the excuse, social media. So, oh, Vince, come on. It's not what it used to be, Vince. Everybody's watching on social media. They're all watching on, oh, Vince, it's apples and oranges. It's apples and oranges. It's apples and oranges. Yeah, okay, bro. Real simple. This past Monday night, from hour 1 to hour 3, the WWE lost over 400,000 viewers. With that being said, and if I want to compare apples to apples, with that being said, I guess we can all assume then that between the first hour and the third hour, 400,000 people left their television show and left their television set and went to watch the last hour on their phones. We can assume that, right? Because of social media now and iPhones and iPads and watching it online and streaming this and streaming your mother, the fact of the matter is 400,000 people from hour 1 to hour 3 left their TV sets because hey, listen, this show's so good, we're going to watch the last hour on our phone. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying? No, here's what I'm saying. 400,000 people left because the show stunk. That's why 400,000 people left. And listen, that's criticism. Look at the show. You're trying to figure out why 400 people left, 400,000. 400 people, 1,000 people, 1,000 left because they didn't care about the main event you booked midway through the show. Stop with the excuses. Stop with trying to bury me because I'm being honest. That's not going to change anything. That's not going to make more people watch the show. You could put your head in the sand. You could be in denial. You can make it, listen, make it company policy. Anybody that criticizes the show, we're going to bury. Make it company policy. Do whatever you want to do. There's one thing that ain't going to do. It ain't going to change the facts, and it ain't going to change the numbers. And that's not going to happen unless you work harder. Somebody told me yesterday that works for TNA. What a great atmosphere it is in the back. Everybody's on the same team. It's paradise in the TNA locker room. Yeah, guess what? When there's no accountability, when nobody's being held responsible, when nobody has to meet a quota, or nobody has to meet a certain number, or nobody has to achieve goals, and there is absolutely no pressure and stress whatsoever on the job, of course it's going to be euphoria. Of course it's going to be euphoria if I'm not accountable for my job. There's no pressure. So I'm going to go to work and I'm going to have fun. This same agent that buried me basically said, wrestling should be fun, and you're not. Well, you know what, buddy? I agree with you. Wrestling should be fun. To the freaking people who watch it, to the people that sit in front of their television sets, it should be fun. It shouldn't be a chore to get through the entire show. You don't go to work to have fun. That's why they call it work. If you're having fun at work, that's a bonus. When I worked at the WWE, the WCW, the TNA, it wasn't fun. It was a job. Why? Because even though I was not held accountable by the boss, I was holding myself accountable. That's why. And that's when there's goals to achieve. That's work. That's work. That's why they say you go to work. They don't say you go to fun. They say you go to work. The people at home, me, we're supposed to be the ones having fun watching this show. So that's it. That's it. That's how I feel. It's out there. Vince Russo is going to continue to do whatever he wants to do. Call him whatever you want. Do a DVD on the self-destruction. Do whatever you want to do, because you know what? Monday, I'll be here reviewing the show. Next Thursday, I'll be doing Nuclear Heat. And if anybody wants truth and not slant and not BS and a real analysis from somebody who's been there and done that, VinceRussoBrand.com, 6 days a week. Thanks for tuning in. God, I got to go take a Valium or something.